There is a podcast that lies between the imagination of two simple-minded earthlings. Travel with these two longtime friends, Jimbo and 80s E, as they attempt to explore the fifth dimension. Follow along with them as they take the key and unlock the door to the vast space between shadow and substance. This podcast is one of trivia, of insight, and of sounds and ideas from one of the greatest television shows ever produced. You are embarking on a timeless journey. There is your signpost up ahead. You are entering the tragedy of cinema's Twilight Zone.
Mr. Mulligan, a rather dour critic of his times, is shortly to discover the import of that old phrase, out of the frying pan into the fire. Said fire burning brightly at all times in the Twilight Zone.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Tragedy of Cinema podcast, the Twilight Zone series. I'm your host, Jimbo.
And I'm your other co-host, 80s E. Jimbo?
Yes, sir?
How you doing today?
Well, let's just say I wish I could go back to 1890 so I don't have to pay all these taxes that I owe. Somehow, they take more out of my check, and I owe more. Something is wrong with this system that we're in.
Yeah, you want to pay those once upon a time 1890s taxes. How awesome would that be?
I don't know, but I want to pay some of that prices from 1890 with that steak on there for 17 cents a pound.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Ladies' hat for $1.25. Can't beat that.
Yeah.
All right. This episode is The Twilight Zone, season number 3, and lucky or unlucky, however you want to look at it, episode number 13, and it's entitled Once Upon a Time.
This is a fantastic episode.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So this originally aired on December the 15th, 1961, and it had a total production cost of, I can't believe this might be the largest number that we've seen, $67,250.76. But the original air date on December the 15th, 1961, if you listen to our last episode, we had a skip over. We had an episode December 1st, and we skipped over December 8th, and now that brings us to December 15th, 1961 for this episode. But more importantly, it brings us to our favorite episode, our favorite segment in our episode, the one that we like to call On This Day in History. All right, so for On This Day in TV and film history, for December the 15th, 1939, we'll go all the way back to 1939, December 15th. And how can we forget Gone with the Wind, the drama filmed by Victor Fleming and starring Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh, premieres in Atlanta. It won Best Picture of 1940, and inflation not adjusted, it is the highest grossing film of all time. But Jimbo.
Yes?
Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind both released in 1939. Oh man, that's mind-blowing.
And you know what? It says something about the movie industry because those two right there are two of the absolute greatest films of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, we might not agree on a lot on this episode, but we definitely can agree on that fact for sure. The two great films out in the same year, I just thought that was unbelievable. All right, 1962. Let's skip ahead a couple decades. Comedian and impressionist Vaughn Meters. Now, I've heard a lot about this. I've heard it referenced before, but he released a comedy album called First Family, and it goes to number 1, and it stays at number 1 for 12 weeks. I guess it was released, obviously, on vinyl. It's a very famous comedy album, but I've never heard it. I'd like to check it out sometime. 1973, December 15th. In 1973, the Pirates of the Caribbean ride opens at Disneyland. December 15th, 1979, British rocker David Bowie performs, if I can get that word out, 3 songs on American television program Saturday Night Live, The Man Who Sold the World, TVC 15, and Boys Keep Swinging. So, David Bowie. You fan of David Bowie?
I did like him in, Labyrinth? Labyrinth was a pretty good movie.
Yeah, right. I forgot about that. He played, that was Jennifer Connelly, I think, right? Mm-hmm. David Bowie, 1979 on Saturday Night Live. All right. December 15th, 2004, probably a film that we're familiar with, $1 Million Baby, directed by Clint Eastwood and starring Hilary Swank and Morgan Freeman. It is released on December 15th, and it actually won Best Picture in 2005. Good movie. December 15th, 2011, ESPN and the NCAA extend their TV rights deal through the 23-24 season, giving the network worldwide media rights to the 24 NCAA championships for various sports. The deal was reportedly worth over $500 million at the time. And actually, we've just come to the end of that deal, right? This year for the NCAA, we're just not too many weeks removed from the men's Final Four basketball championship. So I don't know who it's going to be going forward. I haven't heard any news on that. I don't know if they renegotiated and got that deal extended. But ESPN, the prime carrier, prime broadcaster for the NCAA. December 15th, 2020, the UK newspaper The Sun publishes a recording of Tom Cruise berating his film crew for breaking COVID-19 protocols. Jimbo, have you heard that audio from Tom Cruise? Yeah. Oh, man. He went ballistic, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Lots of cursing in that audio recording. All right, just two sports notes in relation to this date. On December 15th, 1980, this is going back a ways, but we'll get some kind of, relative to inflation, but in 1980, New York Yankee Dave Winfield becomes the highest paid player with a reported contract of 10 years for $15 million. Well, that's nothing in today's dollars, but that was the largest baseball contract. It might have been the largest contract of any sport. Old Dave Winfield, 1980. In 1992, Arthur Ashe is named the Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year on December the 15th, 1992. And then finally, on one final sports note, December 15th, 1997, San Francisco 49ers, they retire old Joe Montana's number 16 in 1997.
One of my favorite players of all time.
Yep. He was a good one for sure. All right. We could have the Tom Brady, Joe Montana debate. I don't think it's much of a debate anymore, but maybe we'll save that for a sports podcast. Jimbo, why don't you tell us who's in the cast of this episode here?
I think it's very, very important to get this right out of the bag at the beginning of this episode. This stars Buster Keaton as Woodrow Mulligan. He's the main character of this episode. This episode was written specifically for him in mind because it ties the silent era movies to the movies, TV shows of that day. So this is why you have it in 1890 and 1960. But Buster Keaton, probably one of the greatest silent movie actors of all time. So, Eric, I did a little biography on Mr. Buster Keaton so we can show you how much he's appreciated. Are you ready? And I do have, Eric, on my Vudu, The Great Buster. It's a documentary. If you have not watched it, anybody that has Vudu or Fandango at home, as it's now called, this is well worth a watch. It opens your eyes to the early life of Buster Keaton, all of his movies and what he went through. But it's very awesome and well done. So here we go, the Buster Keaton mini bio that I did. By the way, he was in The General and The Navigator. That's a couple of his most famous silent roles. But here we go. His parents were vaudeville comedians and incorporating him onto their stage at a very early age, like 3 and 4 in some of their acts. But get this, Eric, they traveled with a medicine show that included their family friend, Harry Houdini. So he was traveling around with Harry Houdini. He got the name of Buster when at the age of 3, he fell down a flight of stairs, was picked up and dusted off by none other than Houdini, and told his father that was a buster. So that name stuck, but it was given to him by Harry Houdini. So that right there, awesome. His father would obviously incorporate him into his act where he would toss him around on the stage, throwing him all over the place. If you watch that documentary, it shows several that it's very, very eye-opening. And I don't think the child labor laws would appreciate it today, but it worked. He considered The General and The Navigator two of his best films that he had done. And here's where it starts going south. His brother-in-law sold his contract to MGM, which Buster regarded as the worst professional mistake he had ever made because he lost his filmmaking independence. Whereas the top three silent comedians of that time, Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, and Buster, Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd went on to become very wealthy, where Buster endured years of financial stress and personal problems due to this one decision that his brother-in-law did to him. So if I'm Buster, I'm not talking to that guy ever again. He did suffer from alcoholism, but he did do all of his own stunts in his movies. So very, very impressive. In 1960, he was awarded 2 stars on the Walk of Fame. One for television at 6321 Hollywood Boulevard, another one for motion picture at 6619 Hollywood Boulevard, and they were both on February 8th, 1960. He is voted number 35th as the greatest movie star of all time by Entertainment Weekly. He is also voted as the 7th greatest director. Charlie Chaplin didn't even make the list. So I mean, you're talking about Spielberg, Scorsese, you're talking about all these people, and he's voted number 7th. So that was just a little look into the life of Buster Keaton and how much he has done, he did for the film industry, and that's why he's still so popular, even, 100 years removed since then. And Eric's looking at me because I can tell by his look that he's probably never watched any Buster Keaton movies. But, Eric, I'll throw this to you real quick. I was going to save it to the end, but I'm going to throw it to you right here. Do you remember going, we went to the same elementary school and church. Do you remember going to the good old Noble Romans, and you would go in there and they would have the silent movies on the screen, while you were eating your pizza and all that. You could watch the silent movie eras like Charlie Chaplin and stuff like that. Do you remember that?
Vaguely. I remember going to Noble Romans, but yeah, I vaguely remember them having stuff up on the wall. Going back to the stunt thing, I read up a little bit and also read that he used to stand in for other people's stunts. Like he was a stunt man for other people. So yeah, that was interesting to me. So obviously a very talented individual, actor, director, and so on and so forth.
Right, but there are a couple other people in this episode that I probably should name just besides the great Buster Keaton. So let me finish this cast before we move on. You had Stanley Adams. He played Rollo, which he did a good job of this too. He had an episode, or he played somebody in Star Trek, but he was also in the great movie that Eric and his daughters like, Breakfast at Tiffany's. You have James Flavin, who was the 1962 policeman. He was in King Kong from 1933. You had Gil Lamb, who played Officer Flanagan. He was in Shirley Temple's Storybrooke from 1958. You had Jesse White. He was the repairman, which that was funny too. But he was in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World in 1963. Harry Fleer, he was in the 1962 Policeman number 2. He's uncredited. He was in the Black Sheep Squadron. You had Norman Papson. He was the trumpeter. Remember when he wakes up, or he's walking around in the 1890s, he's playing the trumpet. You had Warren Parker. He was the clothes store manager. That's uncredited. He was in Lights Out in 1946. You had Milton Parsons. He was Professor Gilbert. He's uncredited. He was in The Hidden Hand in 1942. And yes, last but not least, we do have the great Rod. Oh, wait, we got one more here. We had Georgie Stone. He was Furwick. He was uncredited. He was in Some Like It Hot. And also Arthur Tovey. He was a sidewalk onlooker. He was in Ironside 1967. And also the legendary Rod Serling, reprising his role as the narrator and the host of The Twilight Zone. So, Eric, that is your cast for Once Upon a Time.
All right. Thank you, sir. Give some dates of rehearsal and filming. The dates of rehearsal for this episode were 2 of them, September 6th and September 7th of 1961. Then dates of filming were 3 days, September 8th, 11th, and 12th of 1961. So this one was actually put out rather quickly, within like a couple, 2-3 months after they were wrapped filming. Let me give you a quick plot summary here. In 1890, janitor Woodrow Mulligan uses his employer's invention to transport himself to the future. He imagines an Eden, but finds a polluted, busy world that he doesn't find all that attractive. He meets Rollo, who is also disgusted with the world he lives in, imagining a life in 1890 as idyllic. When Woodrow goes back to his own time, Rollo goes with him, but he is soon bored without any of the conveniences of modern life. So that's a loose plot summary. It was just one I picked up on IMDb. And again, we'll launch right into the episode. This is a break. I know a lot of times, like a long-running series, I think ER, throughout time, if you're fans of long-running television series, many times, like midway through a season, sometimes they'll throw in an episode that's sort of offbeat, right? And it doesn't follow the formulaic sort of existence that happens and that's kind of common in television shows, and that's kind of how I view this episode, along with some of the other comedic style episodes we've said in the past. Like, I don't know, I think we could agree overall. You might really like this episode, Jimbo, and that's perfectly fine. But I think on the whole, the Twilight Zone doesn't do comedy really well. But this episode we'll launch into here, the Act 1, the camera pans down to an Old West 1890s style street. And the episode, we come to realize really early, we're in the silent era style, which again is a tip of the cap to Buster, obviously, because that's why I don't think originally, I think I read in some notes that wasn't the original plan, but they changed it for reasons I can't remember now, but it was supposed to be a talkie, like all the way through, but then they decided to divide the episode up in these two halves. Well, I guess it's not really half, because the first part is silent, then we go to the talkie, and then we go back to the silent. Obviously, the silent's reserved for the 1890s era.
And I'll throw this in right here. I love how they shot it in the silent movie era. The way they shot it was like the film. It's kind of like missing a frame or something. And then when you go to the 1960s, and then we go to the 1960s, you've got it, normal, and then they go back to the silent movie era. And I think it works well for this. Like we said, normally Twilight Zone doesn't do comedies very well, and I think this is probably the best comedy that they've done to date that we've watched in the Twilight Zone.
Right. Another observation you can pick up really quickly is the slides with dialogue, obviously, that go along with the silent era, but there is the saloon style piano music in the background that that's playing. Pick that up. But I'm gonna mess up and call him Buster probably throughout the episode. But right. Mulligan, he's reading a newspaper, right? And he reads where the government has an $85 million surplus. And then this is an important notation. There are things around the town that he observes, like he's sort of disgruntled because he has to pay 17 cents for a pound of sirloin. The ladies' hats are $1.25, and there's a woman advertising for, I think it's like carriage whips. The trumpeter making noise. The blacksmith he's making a bunch of noise, and that'll be a callback for later. And he's just kind of, he's disgruntled. He's like, how could anybody pay these prices? And, that type of thing. And
you see his first interaction with the police officer, and they must have had some sort of history together, because he's like, watch it, and all that. And then It's hilarious because Buster Keaton turns around and he starts mouthing something, and it says censored. You know what I mean? And then he does something else where he falls into the hog bath or hog trough, and it says also censored. And I thought that was really, really funny that they put that up there. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, he's almost hit by the penny farthing as he crosses the street, right? And it's an 8-mile-an-hour zone for the bicycle zone is an 8-mile-an-hour posted speed limit. And then, like you said, he falls into the water trough, and his clothes are soaking wet. So then we get to Rod's introduction narration. It's a quick camera pan in front of. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's a courthouse from the opening shot. You know how the opening shot is on Main Street, the courthouse that's used there. So he gives his narration. Then we go to our first commercial and come back with Act 2. And we got the title shot with the running credits, with everything, as we've come to become accustomed to. And then Mulligan is like trying to wring out all the water in his suit because, he fell in that water trough. And then he's walking to the basement.
He's shaking his leg. Like, you see him shaking his legs trying to get the thing. Oh, hilarious.
Yeah. He's walking to the cellar or the basement, those old, big, wide opening doors that they used to have, like on The Wizard of Oz, like the big opening doors that go underground to the cellar or basement. And we come to find out later that it's his employer, and his employer, he's a janitor, and his employer is a professor, or is like a scientist, professor, whatever.
Gilbert, yeah, Professor Gilbert.
Yeah. So this is probably your favorite scene, right, Jimbo, in the episode where he's wringing out his clothes. He's taking all of his clothes out. And it's interesting to note, too, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but I guess there's a tip of the cap, too, when he's about to put his clothes through the wringer and he almost gets his fingers caught in. I guess that happened to him as like a 3-year-old boy. He got his finger, I guess it was severed, or it got taken off as a result of his finger got caught in an actual wringer when he was a boy, like a clothes wringer. And I think I read somewhere that was an ode to what happened to him in his real life. So he's taking off all his clothes and he hangs them all up on a clothesline.
Dude, he takes the newspaper and he puts it through the wringer, the press, too. He's like hot off the press. That's just classic, man.
So it's done in a really comedic slapstick style, right? And he's the professor and his assistant, the camera pans to them, and they are I'm just going to start reading all the captions that come up in the silent. I'll just read a couple of those. The professor and his assistant are brilliant inventors. It's a time helmet. Put it on and you can visit any year you choose for 30 minutes. Only 30 minutes. Come, we must toast this momentous event with champagne. And then they leave. Then the next quote is, now this makes sense. A machine to take you where there is peace and quiet. This is Mulligan speaking. And then he takes the helmet, and while looking into the mirror, he inadvertently turns the dial to 1960. So, Jimbo, why don't you describe this time helmet for our listeners? What's it look like?
All right. So here's some first number one. It looks like a I don't know, maybe just like a, how would you describe the shape of it, Eric? Like a octagonal helmet. But the funny thing is he has like about 8 of them gigantic sparklers on each side of his helmet that once he turns the knob, they start going off. And now they're stuck on his head, and he's running through the basement. He runs out to the street with it. And you got to remember, this guy is still in his underwear. He's doing all this because his clothes are wet.
Yeah, his bottom half, he doesn't have any trousers on. He's just in his boxers with the suit jacket. And
he's got like the helmet also has like the little barbershop pole on the front. It's like a miniature barbershop pole that's spinning too. It's just like they's like, hey, what can we throw all together on this helmet and make it look as most crazy and absurd as we can. It's got like a little timer that's got like the different decades on it that you turn.
Yeah, it's just like you said, it's like random stuff, and it looks like power lines on the front that connect the electricity, the barber's pole in the front, and then it has like sparklers all around the back of it or Roman candle type sparklers that shoot off whenever he. So after he runs into the street, there's like a big explosion, and then we're transported to modern day for the time, 1961.
And the chicken just jumps into his arms before he teleports too.
Right. Yeah, that comes into play later when they want to go back. Mulligan runs out of the basement. We talked about that. Suddenly there's a big explosion, and then the piano saloon music stops, and all of a sudden we hear car horns and people yelling at him to move. And then we see the chicken made the journey with him also. And he's standing in the middle of the street, and all these people are yelling at him. Then the there's like a guy driving a truck, right? And he's got his arm out the window, and it gets hung up in the helmet, right?
Right.
As he's driving by.
We got to remember when he first makes it here, he starts looking around, and he knows now the speed limit went from 8 to 30 miles per hour. The hats that were once $1.25, the women's hats, are now $45. The steak has went up. I think it was to $1.75 a pound. It was on sale or whatever. And then there was, I think, a poster of a lady selling spark plugs.
Right. Yeah, I like that callback from all the items that he was, paid attention to, the advertisements on the street back in 1890. All those things are, called back, and they're now much more expensive than they were in the 1890s. But after where did I leave off? Oh, the hat by the truck driver, he notices it around his wrist, and he chucks it into the street, and then it's picked up by a little boy on roller skates. And he puts the helmet on. So then, Mulligan, not Buster. Well, it is Buster. He chases after the little boy. He chases after the little boy on the roller skates and tells him to come back. And then there's like a cop talking to the station on a phone. Yeah, and he's like, nothing going on here, boss. Like, it's just this boring all day. And then the kid and Mulligan, run by. And
he's like, I'll call you back.
Yeah. Mulligan chases the little boy with a police officer in tow, and then the young boy runs over Rollo. We meet him, who's reading a book, and then there's more, comedy ensues, more slapstick. And anything here, I don't really have anything.
Well,
until
Buster does,
Jack's.
Buster does, he's getting out of breath, and he sees a bicycle sitting there, so he just takes a bicycle off the rack and starts chasing the guy on the roller skates. And then once the little boy runs into Rollo, he drops the helmet. Rollo stands up. Then here comes Buster on the bike, and he just falls right into him, knocks him down again. So,
yeah, Rollo and Mulligan, they have this conversation kind of in an alleyway, and then they end up going to Jack's fix-it shop. And then Jack takes a look at it, and he just keeps saying, they need to get it fixed. They got 15 minutes before he has to go back. And Jack basically says the whole time, don't touch my tools, don't touch my tools. And after the first entrance into Jack's fix-it shop, he tells him, after looking the helmet over, that he can fix it, he can fix anything, and that he would have it back like Thursday by 2 o'clock. And then Rollo and Mulligan look at each other like, Thursday at 2 o'clock? Oh no, that's too long. And then we go to commercial. Then we come back for Act 3. And here Mulligan discovers TV. And what a TV is, he thinks it's a window.
Dude, that might be my favorite part of this episode, is where he's like, hey buddy, or whatever. He's just, yeah? He's talking.
Yeah, it's a television show, and there's dialogue, and he thinks that the guy is talking to him, but the actor is actually talking to a woman inside.
Yeah, he looks away over at the guy, and then the woman appears on the TV. Then as soon as he looks back, it goes back to the guy. So it's like he's talking to Buster straight to him. Hilarious, absolutely hilarious.
Right. So he looks at the TV, gets locked in a coffin, and then gets accosted by a vacuum cleaner. All in this scene. And then Mulligan wanders out onto the street and tries to steal some pants from a tailor, a clothes guy on the street. And this goes on. Anything? I'm jumping over a lot here in my notes.
Well, it's all about comedy. Like, he locks himself.
Yeah, antics ensue.
The King Tut coffin. He sits on the vacuum cleaner and turns it on, and he ends up running out of the store. I think he goes to try to get some pants, and the guy's like, that'll be $5, because they're outside onto the cart or whatever.
And then he comes in contact with another police officer, right, because he's walking down the street with no pants, and then he's running back into the alleyway where he runs into Rollo, and then they do the old slapstick of walking behind one another. I don't know how to describe it. So the cop running after him.
And when he picks him up to put the pants, because they're doing that walking behind, and then he picks him up, he grabs them pants, and he picks him up and he puts the pants on.
Mm-hmm. Eventually, they return to Jack's Fix-It shop, though, and Jack's got it all fixed up, but Rollo decides that he's the one that's going to use the helmet to go back to 1890. After all, he's a scientist, and Mulligan is, he's just a janitor. So Mulligan tells him in the alleyway, hey, I brought a chicken with me so we can go back together. And then the police officer finds him and chases him down the alley, and Mulligan throws that ladder down in front of him, and then they go around the corner, the old shtick. He runs around the corner, and then Mulligan turns around and looks at his pocket watch and walks casually out from around the corner. And then what happens?
I think
they end up...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say they end up in the middle of the street, right, where all the cars are zooming by in the middle of town, and then Mulligan jumps from the back of the pickup truck bed, right onto Rollo as a big explosion again, and they're transported back to 1890. And then
they land right on the cop, and he kisses the cop on both cheeks.
Yeah. And then the saloon piano music returns, and along with the silent era here. And Rollo, the slides again come up, and Rollo says, oh, charming, charming. And then we cut to 1 week later, slide, and a happy, contented Mulligan. He says, how can they sell it so cheap? Speaking of the steak in the window. And then we go back to the laboratory, right? Oh, he says, oh, Officer Flanagan. That's the part you were talking about, Jimmy. He says, you're such a wonderful sight to behold, or something like that. So they end up back in the basement there of the professor, and now Rollo is the main scientist. And Mulligan comes in and greets him. He says, good morning, friend. And Rollo says, what's good about it? He says, and look at this laboratory. No electronic equipment, no transistor parts, no ultrasonic cathodes, no 1890, no spring mattresses or air foam pillows or electric blankets. For me, 1890 is barbaric. What a dull, primitive era. No frozen TV dinners, no bikinis. So he's concerned there are no bikinis in 1890. And then Mulligan, to end the episode, he puts the helmet back on Rollo, and he sends him back to present day, right, 1910. That's kind of how we close. I probably left out a lot. So interject anything anywhere where I...
Well, I do like at the very end of this episode that the piano saloon music keeps playing, and it's actually playing the Twilight Zone theme with the piano music.
Right. Yeah,
that's really good. It really connects the episode really well.
All right, a few trivia points. I've only got 5 or 6 here. During Rod Serling's closing monologue, just what you just said, Jimbo, the Twilight Zone theme can briefly be heard in an unusual silent movie honky-tonk piano arrangement in tribute to the story's motif. The old-fashioned clothes wringer that Buster Keaton is using to wash his pants in the beginning is the same kind of wringer that crushed the right forefinger when he was 3 years old. A curious little boy, he got his finger caught in the rollers, and a doctor had to amputate it at the first knuckle. In this short, he gets the same finger caught in the wringer for laughs. According to Rod Serling's promo in the previous episode, Richard Matheson wrote the script especially for Buster Keaton. I think Jimbo mentioned that earlier. The dial on the time helmet starts at 1890 and ends at 1990, jumping at 10 and 20-year intervals. The 1890s scenes were shot on MGM's Western Street. It was a very popular street because of its flexibility. The architecture could be used for late Old West and or early 20th century small town. On one end was a large courthouse. This building and the grounds in front of it were also used for Stop at Willoughby in Season 1. That was a great episode. Did we reference that in the last episode, too, where the boardroom was in a Stop at Willoughby, too? Huh. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So this is where Gart Williams, he visits the imaginary hometown. And Or in Season 5, it's also used in Season 5, the Old Man in the Cave episode, where most of all the street is featured. Outside of the series, the streets and the grounds appear in many films, such as the Territorial Courthouse in Clint Eastwood's Hang 'em High from 1968. Jesse White, the repairman, later played the Maytag repairman in television commercials and other media from 1967 to 1988, and I do remember him being on those Maytag commercials.
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
The Unbreakable Maytag, or whatever their slogan was. Sparklers, the kind used on the 4th of July, were used to make the Time Machine helmet. And that concludes my trivia. I have 2 goofs. In 1962, Harmony Town street scenes, the same dozen or so cars and trucks are seen driving around as if they are simply circling around or turning around going the opposite directions. They are in differing orders and groupings, but they're always the same vehicles. So that's a long way of saying they're the same vehicles, they're just in different orders, and they're going around in the same direction, whatever. And the last goof is the tiny barber pole in front on the time helmet. It vanishes and then appears and vanishes. I didn't notice that. I didn't pick up on that. I thought it was always there, but you'd have to really go back and closely look at that to see where that barber pole disappears. Jimbo, I'm kind of picking up on your thoughts and feelings in this episode, but go ahead and expand to tell us thoughts, feelings, questions, observations, and your prop piece.
All right. So, Eric, ever since I started this podcast, I go back and I watch some movies that I've never watched before. And honestly, when that Buster Keaton, I didn't really even know who Buster Keaton was until I watched that documentary. Once I watched that documentary, and I'm like, man, this guy did a lot for cinema history. I started watching some of his silent movies, and the guy did his own stunts. He just captured the scenes that he did. His facial expressions, everything about him is gold. The guy could do more stuff with one piece of prop than probably anybody ever. Like when he had the press, when he was pressing out his clothes. Look at everything he did. He did his clothes. He did the newspaper. He got his finger in there. So he was a comedic genius. I love this episode. I love the throwback to the silent era of movies. I think it's a great thing that Rod and them did by creating this episode to help bridge the gap, because that movie that we did, Sunset Boulevard, he was in that too, because that was about Gloria Swanson or whatever, who was such a big actress in the silent era, and then when they moved to the, we'll call it talkie era, that she wasn't as big of a star then, and she wasn't getting the roles that she deserved now when it went to talking. I think the same thing could be, if you watch that documentary, it explains a lot that once his brother-in-law basically screwed him out of his contract and sold it to MGM, his movies and everything started going downhill. I think he was a living legend. I think he's a legend of the comedian business. We've talked a lot about Twilight Zone. When they do comedy, they do not do comedy right. We've talked about it. Yeah, some of them are just so far out there, like Mr. Dingle the Strong or Mr. Beavis, that it's so far out there that it's just ridiculous. What I like about this is I like the silent era, the way they shot it, the whole throwbacks to the old timey, the words that come on the screen, how they go to present day, how they go back to the old timey era. And just them shooting it the two different ways, I think it brought a lot to this episode. And hopefully it brought a lot of notoriety to Buster Keaton. For me, my prop piece is probably going to be, I don't want to say the time travel hat, because that's a cheap way of getting out of an episode. But I'm going to probably go with either the newspaper or the sirloin steak sign for 17 cents a pound. I think that'd be cool to hang up in the old den here. So for me, when it's done right, it's done right. And with this legend, I'm giving this a 9 out of a 10 for me.
Okay.
So Eric?
I think for me...
And it's time travel. You like time travel.
Yeah, but it was corny.
Of course it is.
Yeah. I know you enjoy that type of slapstick humor, probably a little more than I do, but here's my observations and questions, and I guess a lesson to start out. Stay in your own backyard. Rod says that at the end, or in modern parlance, stay in your lane. I think that's a good lesson that we can learn from the episode. If nothing else, if I didn't really appreciate the episode for other reasons, I can at least take that out. And I guess, well, I got a question for you then, Jimbo. I wrote this down. Just if you could only time travel in one direction, which direction would you go? Would you go to the past or would you go to the future? Have you thought about that?
Absolutely, I'd go to the past. Number one, to talk to some of my family members that have passed away. I think that would be really cool. And number two, to invest in Bitcoin. We wouldn't be having this conversation because we'd be gazillionaires by now. We'd be so rich we wouldn't even know what to call ourselves.
Oh, so we'd be so rich that we wouldn't be talking to one another anymore? So we'd be having this... Oh, I see what you're saying. The conversation is... I got you. I think that is that sort of dovetails with that lesson. No matter what state or what century you're in, you always should be content. And yeah, I think that was a good lesson that was brought to light. Like Milligan, he wanted to go back he wanted to go forward in time. Oh, he actually accidentally, he didn't really purposely. He wanted to go to more, quiet, more serene type lifestyle. The world was just moving too fast for him. I think we can all relate to that on some level. We just want to go to a simpler time, kind of like Garth Williams and A Stop at Willoughby, sort of the same theme, that we want to go back where things were simpler, easier, and, that's a good lesson. Stay in your own backyard. It's not, the grass isn't always greener on the other side and all that stuff, like they say. But I can't let Buster Keaton's accomplishment cloud my vision as I rate this episode. Standalone actor, comedian, director, all of those things. He deserves all of those accolades. But the Twilight Zone, whenever they veer off the path, they don't do comedy very well. I would say my favorite comedy episode was probably The Most Unusual Camera, or Mr. Beavis, maybe, as comedy episodes so far. This one for me didn't make the cut. I probably would rate it right around where IMDb rated it, and I'll just take a look because I don't remember. They rated it at a 7.2. I probably would rate it at probably around that, a 7.2 or a 7. And my prop piece, I gotta take the penny farthing bicycle. That's my prop piece. That's what I want. Those always intrigued me when I saw them in museums and stuff. Like at the Children's Museum, I think they had one.
Like how did they get on? How did they get on them?
How did they get on them? That was always like it's so tall. Yeah. So that pretty much wraps me up, Jimbo.
All right.
You want to close it down?
Sure. If you want to reach us, we are the Tragedy of Cinema Podcast at gmail.com. We are on Facebook. We are on several other social things. But yes, finally, next week, we will be talking about one of Jimbo's all-time favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone that has stuck with him since he was just a wee little lad watching the, I think it was the Labor Day or Memorial Day marathon at his grandma's house. And this is the one that has stuck with me ever since I was a kid. So I cannot wait to hear what Eric has to say because he's probably going to crush my dreams.
No. I'm coming around on this one.
Are you? Because you were like, oh, it's stupid back in the day. But 5 characters in search of an exit, and it is one of my all-time favorites. Now, granted, I haven't watched it in a long time, but that's how good it was that I remember the ending and everything that happened. But I can't wait to dive in, do some research, and see what I missed from that episode or why it is stuck with me for so long. So I'm glad to see Eric's finally coming around. Well, with that being said, I think this episode's coming to a close, and that's a wrap.
And cut.
To each his own. So goes another old phrase to which Mr. Woodrow Mulligan would heartily subscribe. For he has learned, definitely the hard way, that there is much wisdom in a third old phrase which goes as follows: stay in your own backyard. To which it might be added, and if possible, assist others to stay in theirs. Via, of course, the Twilight Zone.